Hi, everyone. I am Stephanie with Nine Health. The coronavirus, as you all know, has kind of upended our whole world these last few days, this last week and a half. It's really changed how we live our lives day to day. I'm joining you from my office, and I'm joined via Zoom by Dr. Margit Henderson. She's a psychologist. We're talking today about, that feeling of losing control. We don't really know what's going on with this virus, and I think that makes a lot of us kind of anxious. So she's going to address that and feelings of helplessness, kind of what we can do about that. So Margit, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Stephanie, for having me. It's a pleasure.
Of course. And this is such a great way to, joining via Zoom isn't ideal, but it's such a great way to easily, make some of these experts like yourself accessible to everyone else. So yes, thank you for joining us. Let's just first talk about that feeling of helplessness and how it kind of shows up in our emotions and our actions.
Yeah, obviously so many things are out of our hands right now. If you are sick right now, that is a terrifying experience. If you're afraid of becoming sick, and then of course all of the financial implications, not to mention just the mundane things about life that are just really different right now. So anytime life changes dramatically, especially when it's something we haven't chosen, that becomes very stressful, of course. And so dealing with that anxiety, the core issue here is helplessness. And so that sense of things being out of our control, emotionally, what that stirs up usually comes in two different flavors, let's say. One is feeling very distraught and sad or despairing at its extreme, or quite angry, frustrated, angry, enraged sometimes. And so to the extent that we feel out of control, we either give up or we fight about it. And so when that comes forward, it can really impact our relationships. We're all cooped up together at home now. And so what that feels like, if we have other people in our house, that can lead to, conflict and other kinds of strains. And so the thing that's really important to keep in mind when we're dealing with helplessness is that I think of it as grief in disguise. Because we are all in mourning right now. We are all grappling with the way that we want our life to be, and it can't be that way right now. And so to the extent that that experience of grief is important to work through and wrap our heads around, right? So grief comes in 5 stages. The first is shock and denial. And we can all relate to that right now, where we just can't even believe that this is happening to us. It's surreal in a sense, all that has changed so quickly. The next stages, and they're not really in order, we bounce around in them, but is sadness and anger. Those are 2 stages of grief, and those are the helplessness components of grief. And then the next stage is called the bargaining stage, and that is just the regrets, the things that any sentence that starts with if only, if only I hadn't gone to that event and gotten exposed, if only I had saved more money, if only I had pulled my money out of the stock market, if only my business hadn't, been impacted like this, or whatever. All of those things that we grapple with and regrets that we have, that's just the brain processing this grief. And then that kind of final resolution stage is acceptance, where we kind of face the reality of what's going on. And we can bounce in and out of these stages for sure, but that is the piece that's really important right now in terms of facing our fears and looking at what our circumstances are. And so the main thing then becomes like, what do we have control over and what don't we have control over? The things we don't have control over, we get to be sad about, even if, somebody else has a loved one who is actually dealing with coronavirus. And the thing we're bummed about is that, it's canceled our wedding, or it's upended our travel plans. Those kinds of disappointments can feel silly compared to the extreme things that are happening to many other people. But we need to give ourselves a softness or a kindness about the disappointments we're all facing and be gentle about that. And then we toggle to, what do we have control over? And the biggest thing we all have control over is doing our part. Like, none of us by ourselves can eradicate this virus, but together as a community, we for sure have control of really abiding by the guidelines that the health experts are sharing with us of doing the distancing that's really important, doing the hygiene measures, really working with those pieces. Those are in our control, and we absolutely must do those things. And that is a really important way to grab a hold of your day. But the other piece of it is, how do you think through what your day wants to look like, because it's so very different. And I would say from an anxiety management perspective, there are three things that are really important for mental health right now. One is some kind of social connection. And so we're getting creative with Zoom and other platforms and Facebook and, FaceTime and different ways of connecting and feeling in relationship, even if you are alone in your house. It's really important that as a community, we think about the people we know who are alone and really reach out to them, because that social isolation is bad for our health and it makes us more stressed out. The second piece is to do some kind of purposeful activity. And that means really dropping into your core values, like what are the things that matter to you in your life? And coming up with some way to manifest that. So doing and setting some kind of goal. It can be a little bitty goal, but some kind of goal for your day so you feel some sense of accomplishment. And then the third piece is some kind of physical exercise, and that's really important for our health and well-being, but it's really important for anxiety. So as we're feeling anxious and overwrought right now, that's an energy that is kind of like a pent up, buzzing kind of feeling. It's a very visceral anxiety is. And so we need to find a way to like move that out of our bodies. And so fortunately, even with the stay in place order, we are allowed to go out and soak up the sunshine. It's beautiful outside today. Walk, go for a bike ride, find a place to hike, stay clear of each other. I discovered today that my dog on my 3-foot leash could sniff the other dog on her 3-foot leash, and we could be about 6 feet apart from each other and our dogs could still say hello. So those ways of being outside. And then finally, the last tip, and this is maybe the most important anxiety management tip I'm going to give you today, is to exhale. Breathe out. It's a silly little thing, but it's something we can all do. And when we exhale and blow the air out all the way, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is like the body's all clear signal. And that really calms the body down. And so we're exhaling all day long, but like do it on purpose and do it with somebody in mind. Think of the healthcare workers who are on the front lines right now. Makes me cry thinking of my colleagues and friends who are out there and they're scared to breathe because they don't have masks on. But breathe, all of us together. Exhale all the way out. Think of someone who's struggling to breathe with this virus. Exhale all the way out. And one way to do that is to make an S sound, like you're exhaling and letting all the air out from a balloon, where you just go. And keep going, keep going, keep going. It's amazing how much air is actually in your lungs. And then we can let the air come in. And you can also do a breath that just says, shh. Like you're comforting a baby, just holding that baby and saying, it's okay. It's scary right now out there, but how do we exhale to let our bodies calm down and feel more grounded in the face of this scary time for all of us? So let us be merciful with ourselves about our disappointments. Let us be purposeful in our days, and exhale as often as you can think of it, and remind each other to do so, because it'll calm your body down. So
yeah, I think that's what I'm struggling with a lot too, is just being purposeful with our day, creating a schedule. But Dr. Coley has joined us, a 9 Health expert, Dr. Pal Coley. Thank you for joining us as well. She can take some general questions about the coronavirus, but again, we're talking about your mental health, your anxiety during this time of uncertainty, kind of that hopeless feeling that maybe some of us are feeling, but we're trying to combat that a little bit and come up with strategies to make us feel a little more in control of a situation we might not know much about. But I did want to have Dr. Coley join us because she can kind of bring some light to that. And this whole social distancing, she has said before, it should empower us and give us some of that power and control back. So Dr. Coley, I'll kind of let you talk about, the importance of social distancing and how will we know that it is working? Like, when will we kind of see the benefits of all that?
Yeah, so I think that's a great thing to talk about today, because we are hearing some mixed messages from our government about maybe social distancing going away in the next few weeks. And I just want to re-emphasize the importance of it, because remember, the virus is not spreading itself. People are spreading the virus by interacting. And social distancing is almost a term that I'm not thrilled with. I like to call it physical distancing with social connection, because we don't really want to get disconnected, just as we heard, because it's important for our mental and physical health. But I think today marks really an inflection point, because we're seeing the New Yorker struggle. We're seeing that in America here now, this is real. The lack of healthcare resources, the storm that's coming is getting closer and closer. So I think as the next few weeks go by, these tips that we're talking about today are going to become extremely important. And what we have to realize is that the social distancing that we're doing today won't pay off for 2 weeks. So the cases that we're seeing out there today are really from 2 weeks ago, what we did. And similarly, what we do today is going to impact what happens 2 weeks later. So you're running a marathon here, not a sprint. So try not to burn yourself out, and really do self-care every single day, so that you can figure out how to continue running this marathon, because we still have a ways to go before we see a turnaround.
Yeah, and I think that's part of maybe the frustration right now is people are like, okay, I've been in my house a week and I still have to stay in my house. So what else can I be doing? And Dr. Margit, you talked about, getting some exercise, some breathing techniques. Dr. Chloe, maybe you can address you mentioned this yesterday, but some of the people that are more at risk of feeling this way, and maybe some techniques that you recommend as well. And it may be the same as what Dr. Henderson said, but some techniques that people can use to feel power again, feel some control in this situation, take care of their mental health.
So I think, it's important not just to identify anxiety and depression and fear in yourself, but also in others. So keep a lookout for the high risk groups, which are generally the people that are older. So the people that are more affected by the virus itself actually tend to have a higher incidence of mental health problems with it, because they're the more vulnerable population. Also, the people with a prior history of mental health disorders like anxiety, depression, or prior suicide attempt. Kids and adolescents, because they may not understand, or they may not quite comprehend, particularly because they're in that low risk group, really their role in this whole thing and how they can serve as spreaders. And obviously it's very upsetting to their routines. And then finally, healthcare workers, because as we talked about, they're on the front lines. And, just imagine being dressed head to toe in the garb, worrying about every breath you're taking, spending all day washing this incessantly, worrying about taking the virus home to your family, and then at the same time fighting to keep your patient alive. It's just a lot on their shoulders right now, and we really have to look out for them as well. So those are the high risk groups, and kind of what I would recommend, or what I've been doing, is trying to find silver linings every day, finding something positive in this virus. And I think some of the things we've talked about are the community togetherness, where we can really see how this is brought us together as communities, and has kind of erased all the differences we have, whether in politics, race, or economic status, anything like that. The other thing that I think the virus has taught us is really the awareness of our health and the power of prevention, because this is one of those preventable things, and how we can kind of help to control that. And then finally, I think what the virus has taught us is nothing's for certain, to expect the unexpected. And it's really taught us how to change our lifestyles in a way that we probably a year ago never would have imagined we would be doing. So I think there's some positives, and I try to find something positive every single day, whether it's the cases that now in Italy are starting to go down, or whether it's that, we're building hospitals, or something that's happening that's telling us that things are headed in the right direction, and that we will get through this.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, and that, we will get through this. We will all get through this together. And I think I like how you say, we're distancing, but not really socially. Let's, try to stay social. We're joining each other via Zoom today. And, there's ways you can join people. And like Dr. Margit Henderson talked about, walking her dog, still staying away from her neighbor, but the dog's got to say hi, that kind of thing. So Dr. Margit Henderson, I wanted to ask you as well, you talked about some ways to combat, the feeling of helplessness, gaining back some control. I have a 4-year-old. Are there ways that you would say to talk about children? I didn't prep you for this question, but I just thought of it. Some ways you might talk to your young child about this, or even, some older children about what's going on, especially when they just complain about not being able to see friends, see family. What are some techniques you would say?
Boy, that is a very difficult issue because it is hard enough for us as grown-ups to fathom what is happening right now, right? And so we're all scrambling, trying to figure out how we're going to do our work, take care of our kids, get the groceries we need. And for young people, this is just head spinning. And so I think part of it is they are going to pick up from us how we're handling it. So one of the most important things we can do for our children is really work on our own physical calm, because we pick up sort of emotional energy from each other. There's an emotional contagion that happens. And then to your question of how on earth do we talk to young people about this? And obviously it varies quite a bit depending on age, but one of the things that's really important is just to address their disappointments. Life is full of disappointments. This virus is creating massive disappointments. Disappointments is even kind of a tepid word for what is happening right now, but it is that sense of grief and loss, right? So the things that we want to be able to do that we can usually do, and that we're confused about it. And you can even say, like, I'm confused. I don't even totally understand what's happening right now. I'm trying to figure it out, and my grown-up brain is a little overwhelmed with all of this. So I get that you're having a really hard time, sweetie, figuring out what's happening here, but I promise we're going to stay together as a family. We're connected, and we're going to just be creative right now. And I think that's one of the things that's really tough as parents, is that we're expected to offer leadership to our children. Our kids look to us for answers. We look to our leaders for answers, whether it's leaders within our work community or within our government. And that can be really overwhelming when nobody really has good answers, because this has never happened before. It's unprecedented. And so that makes us really uncomfortable and feeds back into that loop around helplessness, right? Where somebody's looking to us saying, tell me what's going on, and I don't have a good answer, right? So I think sometimes to just be really candid with our kids, including our little kids, of like, how you're confused sometimes, I'm confused right now too, but that doesn't mean we can't together make this a good day, and then to decide like the little things we can do, the things we can be grateful for. I mean, one of the things that is quite remarkable in the research about crises is that, as we know, because we're living it, it like makes everything unimportant sort of like fall away. And all of a sudden we are dropped more into our core values. We're dropped more into the things that really matter to us. And that's kind of a cool thing to talk to kids about, right? Is like, what's most important to you? And how can we make that happen today? Like maybe we draw pictures for the retirement community that's in our neighborhood, and we send some pictures, or we write little letters, and where kids can feel like they can make a difference, where we might go to the neighbor who's there by herself or himself, and send a message through the door there to be able to say, like, can we help in any way? I mean, these small ways of bringing a little sunshine, make a little video and send it to a grandparent. Those are things that matter. And again, we all want to feel empowered. We all want to feel like we can make a difference, and kids can make a difference. I'm thinking about how many smiles we have from our little doggies having skirmishes in our house. They're cracking us up and keeping things light. Kids are such a blessing in that way too. And let them know that they matter. Let them know that they have made your day a little brighter, even though they probably also made your day a little more stressful too. But that's the balance.
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to look at it as, we get some quality time together and trying to make the best of it. We still have to work remotely, but yeah, just making the best of the time that we do have together. And Dr. Coley, we're getting some questions, and this might help people a little bit, gain some control in their minds. But I know we don't know a ton about when things, will end, but people are asking, is it gonna be over mid-June, July, April? Those are the kind of questions people are talking about in the comments right now. I don't know if you can address that and just kind of give an update for us on what we're saying right now.
So when this ends will really depend on a few different factors. The first is really how aggressively we socially distance. So we heard from the mayor yesterday of Denver that we're at a stay-at-home order, and that's certainly one of the most aggressive forms of social distancing, short of a complete lockdown. But in the state of Colorado, we haven't seen that order yet. So how much we flatten that curve and how long this is going to last depends on those factors. So by reference, we're basically looking to China and Italy, which are the countries that have pursued the very aggressive lockdowns. And the course of their curve was essentially about 10 weeks or so. So from the time it started to the time it peaked to the time it kind of started to come down. And so that's the most aggressive. In other words, that's the shortest that it is. Now, again, depending on what happens in the next few days, weeks, or months, I would say we still have several weeks ahead of us before we can start relaxing some of these social distancing guidelines that we're talking about. And if we do end up in a situation where we're at stay at home everywhere, or in the extreme case, a lockdown, it might shorten that timeline just a bit, but we're still several weeks away.
Okay, thank you for kind of giving us that update, providing that answer. Again, we are doing this all week this week at 9 Health. We are hosting these Facebook Lives to talk about mental health, anxiety, just kind of checking in on our community, checking in on everyone, and giving some tips for relieving that anxiety you might be feeling at this time, as we're all kind of hanging out in our houses. We have some tools on 9healthfair.org. You can go to our website and click on e-tools. We have mental health screeners there that you can do for anxiety and depression and get connected to free resources for help if you feel that you need that. I did want to ask Dr. Margit, maybe for those that are around, family, loved ones, what are some signs that someone might need to seek out some help? And then talk about how you as a psychologist are helping people right now in this, this era of distancing ourselves from each other, how you're using virtual appointments and things.
Mm-hmm. So as we were talking about, it's totally normal for all of us to be feeling a heightened level of anxiety. So it would be unusual if you weren't feeling a little bit nervous right now. But I think the question of when that tips over into a more clinical issue that really does require mental health care, is important to be thinking about. And I think one of the most powerful forms of helplessness, or ways that helplessness manifests, is suicidal ideation, right? So sometimes people really full on just decide to give up. And if you have any whiff that a loved one might be feeling at risk of harming themselves in any way, and, a huge job loss, a huge economic crisis, those are the kinds of things that have people turn on a dime to feeling very deeply despondent. And so it's not always associated with depression. It often is, but anxiety can lead to that most extreme form of helplessness, right? And so if you have any spidey sense that is coming up for someone you're with at home, please ask them directly. It's a scary question to ask because we fear that we're going to give them the idea, but the research is really clear that that is not the case. It is important to ask and then seek out help immediately. Most of the insurers are providing telehealth assessments. I, for the first time, have been doing video therapy. I've never done that before, but there are some really fantastic, easy to use telehealth platforms that community providers are able to use right now to really quickly switch over our in-person practice to being able to do assessment by phone. That's of course true also for medical concerns that people have. There are nurse lines and other kinds of, you all can speak to that more specifically, I'm sure, and have information, but how to use video health and telehealth where you don't have to risk exposing yourself or someone else to actually come in for an assessment, whether it's for mental health issues or medical issues. And so being able to have those conversations with a clinician who can sort that out, and then bring help along the way. I mean, this is the piece where all of us coming together to find ways where things that we do have control over is so important so that we don't feel swamped by the helplessness. And if there is a clinical kind of chemical, these also are highly genetic. These issues are highly genetic. And so it's not a character flaw. It's a medical condition. There is help, there's medicine help, there's therapy help to be able to turn this around and not have a crisis on our hands from a mental health perspective. But do keep in mind that mental health issues can be lethal as well. And so we need to be very proactive about intervening early in those circumstances.
Right, and Dr. Coley, I wanted to bring this up kind of when we talk about all this mental health stuff. You've talked about the emotional contagion, how the stress and anxiety around this coronavirus can spread, just as quickly as the virus is, or even faster. Where do you think we're at right now with that? Do you think people are feeling a little better now that not better, but I guess there's a little more information out there now. We're kind of seeing trends around the world. Do you think that emotional contagion part of it has kind of slowed down, or do you think it's still running amok? Are there things that people can do to kind of help themselves when they're trying to stop the spread of that emotional contagion?
Yeah, I think there has been a change, because I think the emotional contagion now is coming less from others. That sort of panic buying and those types of behaviors, I feel like, have dropped off a little bit. But we still are in a little bit of that fear zone because of what we're hearing about the numbers. We keep counting the numbers every day. And, as time goes on, they will go up, and that's expected. But certainly that can increase the level of fear. But I don't think it's as much a phenomenon of social contagion anymore as it is of just anxiety, the rising epidemic of the virus. So I do think recognizing being out there has really helped to really control some of that emotional contagion.
Yeah, I think so as well. But I think we are still, just a little uneasy, all being in our houses, not really knowing what will be next, but just trying to take it one day at a time and doing the best we can. Again, you can ask questions on the Facebook. I'm going to sign off here in just a moment. Dr. Margit Henderson, I did want to see if there was anything else that you wanted to add, any additional measures people should be taking to take care of their mental health as we deal with all of this before we sign off, and just give you one more chance to kind of say a few things, and then we will let both of you go, and people can continue to ask questions in the feed. We'll answer them. Again, go to 9healthfair.org for our mental health screening tools, and there's some resources there as well. But Dr. Margit Henderson, anything else that we should be doing, even as we go into this evening, tomorrow, just taking care of our mental health?
Well, I mean, I think the main thing is to be, again, coming back to this issue of grieving, and just to allow yourself to be kind about that, both with yourself and with your loved ones. It's easy to get frustrated with each other. And so how to, bring that extra willingness to just be gentle with yourself, whatever it is you're disappointed or frustrated about. I mean, people might be disappointed that they can't go get their hair cut, or that they can't, go, do the kinds of things that are their usual self-care, their yoga class or whatever. And then again, just orienting to ways that we are coming together as a community. It is amazing to see how many opportunities there are for, finding a yoga class online, listening to an opera online, going to a museum, all the ways that we are going to become more connected after this is all said and done, and really being able to soak that up in the near term. So with all of that said, I mean, there of course is so much more, but I think those are some good basics. And again, the most important thing is to help your body calm by focusing on that exhalation that you can do so easily at any time. It's just a matter of remembering it. That's the hard part. Thanks.
And remembering to take care of ourselves, and along with those around us, which I think is always a challenge too. But I will let both of you ladies go. Thank you so much for joining us.